Zero Trust Demo Forum. This panel, we're going to be talking about data security. I'd like to really thank the folks that showed up here. We've thrown a whole bunch of interesting stuff into the mix. We've demoed a whole lot of cool technology. I'd like to get everybody's thoughts on kind of where we are with data security in the context of Zero Trust and why this continues to be kind of the last unsolved problem in the space. And JD, I'll start with you. How do you see data security as it stands in the context of Zero Trust today?
Good day to everybody. Thanks, Dr. Cunningham, for having me on. It's good to be with you guys today. With regard to zero trust architectures and data security, I think that's ultimately what we're after, right? Protecting data and trying to create the proverbial defense in depth around our critical data assets. And now more than ever, zero trust architectures are not just for on-premise capabilities, but they're also for our hybrid cloud and cloud-specific capabilities. So, from a protection standpoint, in my perspective, and from my perspective, I should say, I think we've got to take a much broader view of where our assets are living. And I think if you look at traditional data access governance, trying to figure out data classification, labeling, these are principles that still involve a lot of work. They involve a lot of visibility of where our workloads are moving. And from a data protection perspective, it really is assuming that that data has a high degree of potential compromise. And when you start to build your zero trust architecture from there, you're looking at ways you can create the proverbial moats around those particular perspectives. And if you assume compromise from that, and my perspective from an identity, you start there, you're able to then drive out potential failure modes and continue to harden where that data lives. It's the Mentos comparison, right? Where historically networks have been kind of soft and chewy in the middle, and fundamentally we tried to make them a little bit hard on the outside. I think we've got to continue to use zero trust architectures to make sure that that hardening of the data is actually on the inside as well.
And Robbie, you guys have a different approach to solving data security. Why don't you give just a little bit of insight into what you see as the kind of fundamental problem in the data security market and how you've looked at that problem with your particular technology?
Absolutely. No, it's a great question, and I think everything that JD said is absolutely true. And of course, like JD, thank you guys for having me today. It's good to talk with you. It's always a pleasure. Dr. Cunningham and Amit and JD, thank you for being panelists with me. I agree with a lot of what JD said, and I actually really appreciate and like that Mentos comparison. If you're okay with that, I'm going to borrow that moving forward. But it's a really interesting question, Doctor, in that at the heart of all the attacks, I think as my panelists would agree, is really the data itself, right? That's what we're all kind of here to protect, because that's at the heart and the nature of every adversarial attack. So the way that I personally and kind of the company looks at it is, what can a company do to simultaneously preserve the usability of that data, which is why they're collecting it. Let's be real, collecting it, generating it, sharing it, analyzing it, it's all driving company operations. So the question is, how do you preserve the functionality, the utility, and the underlying purpose at the heart of the data, while also keeping in mind the kind of, as JD put it, the complete assumption of compromise and that Mentos mentality, which is we can't keep one area soft, one area hard. We can do what we can to try to recreate that scenario, but also let's try to target the data itself. And what I mean by that is, let's go with a data forward approach almost and say, okay, what can we do to make the data as least sensitive as possible, give access to the right people in the right moment, right? But not everyone all the time in all applications. That's a kind of a recipe for disaster, and apply that zero trust paradigm and that methodology past the point of access controls into the applications, because I think that's where a lot of people kind of stop their analysis, but then all the way kind of through that barrier down to the data field level. And that's really where we kind of see the problem is data fields are still that kind of juicy carrot at the end of the journey. And once, or I should say, if, these other walls and defenses fall, once that data is there, it's there. And we try to say, no, that doesn't have to be the case. Why don't we say, once the data is accessed, there's another layer of protection, but do it in a way that I think I really embrace what former, retired General Toohill referred to as kind of the three pillars of zero trust, which is, well, I'll say three pillars of security, which is one is zero trust, which is why we're here, but then two is usability of the tool. And I think that's a crucial component that people really miss. Is there's a lot of very powerful tools, but I think, why the panelists are here today is we also have an emphasis on, is it usable? Is it functional? Can you actually apply it? And then also kind of things like thought and knowledge sharing, which is why we're also here. So I think the real question boils down to the technical level of how does it secure the data itself in a way that if it's accessed by a, potentially malicious inside actor or a potentially problematic outside actor, it is as secure as far down the pipeline, as far up the pipeline as humanly possible. And that's really where what our company focuses on is that last mile defense. Hopefully that answers your question, Doctor.
Yeah, good response. So, Amit, you guys have a different approach to this problem as well, and I think it's really great that we have kind of three different approaches to data security on the panel here. But how do you see data security as it stands, and how do you approach this problem?
I think that if we look into it in a higher level, today there is two major things that are happening. One is the fact that employees are working from anywhere, but also resources are moving away from on-premise to the cloud. And corporate network today, in reality, is the internet. And that basically changes all the methodologies that we use to secure data. If we thought about taking a file server and put it in the office and making sure nobody can access it, right? It's not the case any longer, and you have basically a very highly distributed network and resources and employees that are consuming and accessing data, transferring data, no matter where they are, and also throughout different transport layers, whether it's the internet or so forth. And basically speaking, there is a concern and also debate how basically we shift all the security tools and services and appliances that we've built around the premise, a physical premise, like firewalls and data loss prevention and tools that are physically based in the office, and basically adjust them to fit the new workforce, which is cloud first and mobile first, and work from anywhere, and the resources are everywhere. And that's exactly I think the challenge, right? How we can basically provide companies tools in order to secure their data while everyone are working through the internet. And this is where zero trust and other types of similar solutions are getting in, and basically trying to move away from a site-centric model to a user-centric model.
Yeah, I mean, it's users, I think, are the cog around which the mechanism of zero trust revolves, and users access data. So with that being the crux of this, JD, I know that you guys have an interesting approach to how you actually help solve the problem of users and access to data. How do you think that plays into where the space is going? Are we going to be in the same sort of model in 3 years where we're still solving for access to data, or is that going to become part of a really cogent response and strategic approach using technology to solve this problem for the long haul?
Yeah, good stuff. We a couple years ago, the new rage and the new phrase, the catchphrase was "identity is the new perimeter," and I've got some inside jokes with some customers and some prospects on that they're already kind of tired of that. So I'm using that in jest, not necessarily as I believe that's the future, but it is pretty important with regard to everything that Amit mentioned of identities going everywhere in different networks and everything. So, if we start there, and in my particular opinion, if we go back to data tied to identity, administrative access in all of our breaches is there. I mean, Chase, you've seen it on the front lines. I've seen it through breaches. We've all seen it through breaches, and they want to get the credentials. So, if you assume an admin credential is compromised, what do you do from there? How do you create defense mechanisms to assume that they can use that credential and go anywhere they want, because in the reality of it all, they can. And fundamentally what we see around privileged access, even though the space has been fairly well defined since the mid-90s. I mean, this is not a new market from our perspective, but taking a different look at how to defend your privileged identities is important, because Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I think you could argue what we've done with privileged access and identities in that regard is not necessarily working if you look at breach statistics, because people are always using stolen admin accounts to move laterally. So zero trust from our perspective in an identity-centric world is using just-in-time administration to ensure that the right person at the right time has the right access, and no longer do they have that access after they're done doing their job. Couple that with multi-factor authentication. We all know that's always the best way to go. And I know many folks are coming out with some really cool contextual authentication capabilities that we partner with to make sure that you've got the right step-up authentication. But then we come in and truly focus on the authorization piece, because in summary, and I'm stealing again from another customer here, she fundamentally says, it seems like we've evolved to just creating admin access just in case, and where we've got to go is move to admin access just in time. And I thought that was very beautifully stated. I steal that all the time now. And I think that's the situation we're in. Just to give you some perspective, on average with our prospects and even some of our customers before they start their journey with us, an organization, a good sized organization of about 10,000 endpoints will have anywhere from 480 to 500 standing admin accounts with 24/7 admin access on it. And that's just username and password or a hash that would allow them to get onto that box and then potentially move laterally. So when you start to quantify the risk there, you really see the importance of a zero trust architecture through the concept of locking down those admin accounts and making sure you're using just-in-time administration.
Yeah, just in time. That's a difficult problem to solve, but it's something that I think is extremely critical in the space. So going forward and kind of wrapping up here, just Amit, on your perspective of where we're going, what do you think we're going to be doing for data security in the context of zero trust over the course of the next, say, 18 to 36 months?
I think that one of the beautiful things that Zero Trust and other platforms that are basically implementing Zero Trust are bringing that they are software based and software defined, and that basically allows you to innovate and implement solutions more holistically, okay, in a much broader view, rather than data security tools that have been implemented within the office based on appliances and hardware, and to have different data points and both look on the network itself, but having context to who is the user, where he is from, what are the different metadata that every request includes. And what we're going to see is solutions that are basically software driven, that are providing zero trust network solutions, will continue and be developed, and will add more and more data points based on user behavioral analysis, the data inspection itself, where it comes from, where it is going, in a more holistic way of your network, and provide the greater visibility to security analysts and IT managers and into to the status of the network, where data is flowing, and so forth, and allow to take better decisions in data management in a single place, right? So a single management console that will allow you both manage the network, the security policies, but also control your data and the user behavior.
Yeah, behavioral analytics, that whole segmentation approach, the dynamism that we need in the space is going to continue to evolve, I think. So Robbie, last shot over the bow, in your perspective, as we continue to move forward, how do we do data security better? What is required to enable zero trust for organizations, especially in the realm of data security, which, as you stated, well, you didn't state it, but the Texas side of me says data is the Alamo. So how are we going to move to taking care of the Alamo?
No, I think you're exactly right. And Amit, I couldn't agree more. I think the emphasis on vendor consolidation and integration of kind of dynamic frameworks and context around user behavior, user identity, devices, hardware, appliances, software, geographic tagging, even considering things like regulatory, which we haven't really gotten into here, and I don't, obviously compliance isn't security and security is not compliance, but as a lot of people are evaluating the tools out there and their posture in light of new kind of exogenous factors pushing one way or the other, both private and public markets, I think Amit is right in that people are going to want a real kind of holistic view of their data. Where is it going? Where is it living? Where is it transferring both inside and outside? I use the term perimeter loosely, right? Even that there is no perimeter in a lot of ways, or it's software defined, but that idea that your data, in fact, is still your data, even when it's not with you anymore, right? That there's that growing recognition that I'd say has been around a while, as JD was mentioning, but is really coming to the forefront now. So in terms of dealing with this kind of last frontier, the Alamo, as you put it, Chase, I think it's a great question, because I think the real idea that people both want more power but also more simplicity and manageability, right? Kind of gone are the days maybe 10, 12 years ago when people were okay setting up a single tool for 6 months, right? I just don't think there's that appetite anymore. And at the same time, there are so many strong tools out there handling very focused problem sets, but they want that holistic, not just integration in the technical sense, but integration in the strategic sense. And I think that's really where, I've been following you, Chase, for a long time. I'm sure these guys have too. I know you've been a big proponent of security being within a broader strategic mindset as a company, right? You don't just get security for the sake of it. It has to fit with where you're going, what you're doing, and what you need to prioritize. So to answer your question, where we're going, I think is a fewfold. One is consolidation. Two is high level of ease of use and integration between otherwise kind of siloed tools and teams. Three is more transparency. I completely agree with Amit and JD. The transparency, the tagging, the contextual awareness of not just, is this an email or a social or a credit card? That means nothing unless you know why it's doing what it's doing and who's seeing it, under what contexts. Really locking down the who can see the data, where they can see it, why they can see it, right? And in a much broader sense, I completely also piggyback off Amit saying that now, that question has exploded out as people have kind of scattered like dust to the wind from the otherwise kind of cozy corporate perimeter. And so now that kind of who, what, where, when is going to be really the context and the tools that can give you a solution to the who, what, where, when, and leverage extremely sophisticated technology on the back end to make the usability on the front end very intuitive. I think that's really where we're going to see a lot of advancement in the coming 18, 24 months. And once we get that, of course, there will be the next Alamo, but I think this data security Alamo is going to take kind of huge leaps and bounds in terms of the number of breaches, the sophistication of the breaches, and quite frankly, the depth of the breach that we see within these organizations that JD was mentioning. And we can't keep doing the same thing. So we have to push forward with that.
You heard it here. Can't keep doing the same thing. Thank you very much for the panelists coming on. Data security, the original impetus for Zero Trust continues to evolve. We've got some amazing demonstrations coming up in the forum. Thanks, guys, for jumping on the panel, talking about the single most important thing in all of cybersecurity, which is data security.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.